Hey, welcome back. It's a terrific Tuesday on Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco. To me, that was a wonderful segment talking about things that people are doing to try to combat the spread of extremism and hate, which leads to division in our country. And speaking of hate, joining us now is Robert Cherry. He's a professor emeritus at Brooklyn College in the economics department. And your recent article here was written about what the left doesn't want to mention about hate crimes. And there was some New York City stats that came out in the last week about hate crimes. And the left is all the party of equality and women and minorities, but they don't want to talk about this stuff. Tell us why you're talking about it.
Well, I've been quite interested in this because part of my background is I'm been at Brooklyn College and I do material on discrimination, and I also have been on the board for 30 years at the College Hillel, so I'm particularly sensitive to issues that affect the Jewish community. And I was just struck by the absence of any serious, even less than serious, comments on any kind of outrage, what's been going on in New York City, particularly in Brooklyn, but in New York City over the last 12 months.
Professor, I think this is kind of a national issue too, because we're seeing, anti-Semitism spike up right down to Congress. But here in New York, over the last 12 months, there were 246 anti-Semitic attacks. That's up 144 from last year. It's a 70% increase in anti-Semitic attacks. And then further down in LGBT violence, according to your article, that's up 33% from last year. How come the left isn't outraged about this stuff?
Well, no, we do hear about the rise in anti-Semitic attacks. We do hear about the rise in hate crimes. But if you listen to a lot of the media coverage, you'd think Donald Trump was to blame for them all, aided by a bunch of skinheads, white supremacists, and Nazis. And I had no idea about this until I read your op-ed in the New York Post today, Professor Cherry, that's not the case. It's not white supremacists. It's not Nazis. It's not Trump supporters wearing MAGA hats that are committing a good portion of these hate crimes. Who's committing them?
Well, the individual ones are not committed. The mass ones, like in Pittsburgh and out in California, that's certainly the white supremacists. But the day-to-day individual crimes, which are overwhelmingly in cities, anti-Semitic acts, half of them are in New York City, the assaults, those are being committed, unfortunately, but the reality is that they're being committed by disproportionately black youth. And that's just not a narrative that the progressives want to hear. I mean, if it's a white supremacist, they're out there, but if it's some young black kid who, without going into whatever the reasons are, there's a total silence on that.
I don't hear a lot of this. I know you're a professor at Brooklyn College. I don't hear a lot of this stuff coming out on city university campuses, that's for sure. Can they talk about this stuff?
Well, I don't think City University is different than most campuses where both the administration and the leading institutions of the faculty, whether it's Faculty Senate or the union, are pretty much in the progressive wing. And they may make some general statement about anti-Semitism. I think my president at Brooklyn College has been fairly good on this
Are you
issue.
making a general statement but saying that a lot of these crimes are perpetrated by young black men?
Well, no, he's not saying it.
No, I'm saying who's saying it. I don't see that here.
They're saying it with a whisper, not
But what I'm saying is, are there any statistical evidence?
Yes, it's all in the article.
I don't see it here. I read the article.
Go to the next page.
Go to the next page.
There's certainly in the last quarter 24 of the 34 hate crime arrests were black Americans. For the LGBTQ community, over the last almost 3 years, 60% of the arrests have been African American. That's also true in this last quarter, but that's a long-standing issue of concern. So those are the New York statistics. National statistics are fairly similar. Not quite as strong,
So,
but
Professor
similar.
Cherry, you've looked at hate crimes in two areas, LGBTQ crimes and anti-Semitic crimes, and both of them, there's an enormous percentage of the perpetrators being young black men. Let me ask you about Donald Trump supporters' favorite target, at least according to many in the media, Muslims are often the victim of hate crimes, at least here in New York City, where we have a large Muslim population. Who are the folks that are attacking Muslims in New York? Surely those have to be the Trump supporters.
I have in the article a number of very serious incidents of attacks on Muslims in the Bronx, and they are not Trump supporters. They are African American. And there's really been an underreporting of these attacks on Muslims in the Bronx. And I think it's part of this issue of being uncomfortable with identifying them as young black men.
So according to the New York City Commission on Human Rights, in your article, it says black Muslim women are at a notably high risk for bias-motivated assaults, with 1 in 5 women experiencing physical assault. Now, are these women the ones being attacked by Trump supporters?
I don't think so.
These aren't. Not these either. So all these hate crimes that are happening here in New York City, no tangible
extensive
amount
look
is
at
by,
the anti-Semitic assault crimes, and what was found was that in virtually none of the attacks in New York City was there anyone who could be identified even loosely with the right wing, even though Mayor de Blasio tried to make that point.
Well, and Andrew Cuomo. Well, last weekend, Andrew Cuomo, when the Proud Boys were doing a march or something, he went out of his way to call them some dopey nickname. So we're seeing a lot of attacks from groups like Antifa. We see folks that are in Black Lives Matter holding signs that say F the police and NYPD equals KKK, even though the
Colin
NYPD...
Kaepernick wearing pigs on his socks.
Even though the NYPD is a minority organization. Why do you think we've seen such silence from our political leaders that the perpetrators of a lot of these hate crimes against Jews, against gays, against Muslims are in fact minorities themselves?
Well, I think it's broader than that. I mean, after all, there are about 8,000 black Americans, homicide victims of black Americans, overwhelmingly by other black Americans. And yet there's essentially been a silence on that as well. So it's not simply hate crimes, but it's whenever there is a disproportionate share of crimes. Here I'm talking about crimes that are against other black Americans. There's an uncomfortableness because it is certainly true that the black community continues to suffer from historic disparities. And the fear is if you bring out some of the warts in those communities, it reinforces an attitude of neglect that we don't have to do as much as we need to rectify some of the historic deprivations that exist in black communities.
Okay. All right. Well, Robert Cherry, I want to thank you for coming down and giving us your bird's eye view of what's happening on this. You're teaching the youth of America, so I hope you're staying objective in doing that, and God bless you for keeping us informed on what's happening. You're watching Liquid Lunch. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back right after this.
Well, thanks for having me.